So we thought since this is coming out on April 1st, April Fool's Day, we would cover one of the biggest fools, Chad Daybell.
Let's get into it.
Hi, welcome back to my show for a very special episode. I have guests. I have Cori Williams, who is another true crime enthusiast. Hi, Cori.
Hi.
And Amy LaMont, who is also a true crime enthusiast, but also comes from an RLDS background, which can you tell us a little bit about what that means?
So we all had started with Joseph Smith being the father patriarchy of our religion, and then when he was killed in Nauvoo, there was kind of a crisis of who's going to be the next president or take over the church. We believed in our church that it needed to come down the Smith lineage, and Brigham Young had gotten a vision or was revealed to him that he needed to continue the Mormon church elsewhere. So that was a big schism in our church at that point. He led his group to Utah and continued being the LDS, and then our group reorganized, and so we ended up becoming the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which that's a mouthful. And having been confused with Mormons for so long, we have just recently changed our name to Community of Christ.
Okay. So I can be safe to assume that you might have some different beliefs, but that you would still have a lot in common with the regular, I hate to say that, but the other LDS.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes. So I was really excited to get your take on this because obviously we are covering Chad Daybell's awful autobiography. We read this so you all, my viewers, don't have to.
You are welcome.
Yes.
Yes. And I really, really want to say thank you again because this was a chore. This was not fun for any of us.
I had to read multiple sentences. I had to reread multiple sentences to make sure that what I was reading was supposed to be right, because it was either, well, not misspelled, but it was put together so badly that I was like, yeah, that's what he meant to say, but he certainly said it wrong.
Yeah.
And then just the irony that he went to school for journalism and it was so poorly written.
Yeah. I was saying he is not giving BYU's J School a very good look here. So, but I won't hold it against him. But yeah, I wanted to read this book because I know most of like Lori and all these other people who are following him. I think they mostly kind of started following him through his, like, what's it called? Times of Trouble series, where he has like all the stories of people that are living through what he prophesies is going to happen. But in this book, this is his autobiography. I wouldn't call it a memoir. It's an autobiography. But this is where he first starts claiming that he has all these visions and prophecies and stuff like that. So I felt like it was good to, like, get to the origin story, so to speak. Plus, I am not going to read all those books. Like, sorry. I don't think anybody wants to do that. So yeah, I wanted to read it, and Cori and Amy very kindly agreed to read it as well. But one thing we agreed on was that we were not going to put any money in Chad Daybell's pocket. So I got a used book, and check it out. Can you see?
Signed copy.
Yeah. And Cori borrowed this from me, and Amy, you got yours from.
I don't know if you can see it, but
interlibrary
loan. Yeah, it's not going to show up, but yeah, interlibrary loan.
The camera's like, no.
Right.
Yeah, and when we interlibrary loaned it, it seemed like mostly all these libraries in Idaho and Utah had it. That was where it was primarily. It's not surprising.
Yeah, so you know he probably like donated a shit ton of them and then wrote it off on his taxes. Like,
Yeah.
that's what he did.
Or just sent the book to them and they were like, oh, we'll add it to the collection. That's probably
Right.
what happened.
Yeah, and so while I'm looking through it and while I'm reading it, I realized that I hope I'm not going ahead too far, but when he talks about going into the last fork of the road, and he's like, yeah, this one's going to be lots and lots of money, but this other one is going to be trials and hardships, but I am going to feel, satisfied because I'm doing the Lord's work. Basically, he was working for the church publisher, and our church has a publisher too, so that's why I know. So it's funny. It wasn't even like it was. Well,
Like
I mean,
that.
I'm not going to say it wasn't a major publisher, but
I gotcha.
I don't think there was going to be major money on either one of those paths, but yeah. So I'm just kind of looking at my notes over here, and so just to kind of summarize the plot for those of you who are watching and don't want to have to read this for yourself. It starts with him. He's swimming in Flaming Gorge Reservoir with his friends. And he says he, climbs up on this big 60-foot cliff, allegedly. Like I'm not just gonna believe him, but he jumps off this really, really high cliff into the water. And he says he heard a pop in the back of his head when he hit the water, and then a sharp pain in the front in his forehead. And I immediately thought that sounds like a contra coup injury, like to have something in the back of your head and then immediately in the front. Like if you've ever seen like an illustration for shaken baby syndrome, the brain is a squishy, it's got the consistency of pudding and it's inside, this solid, hard cranial area. And so when it jerks really fast, literally it like water. And so you'll get an injury at the original place, and then you'll get an injury from where it hits the front of your skull. So that's what struck me was I think he had a serious head injury.
Yeah.
And he talks about like 2 other times that summer he had other things that caused head injuries. So I'm kind of like,
Mhm.
a lot of head injuries there. But
Yeah.
anyway, that was his big, first near-death experience that, opened up the veil and, allowed him to see all this stuff. But then it just kind of jumps back in time, and like 2 chapters of it are like telling the story of his ancestors, like his father. And like I know Mormons are really into genealogy, but I mean to me, I'm like, why? Like nobody cares.
Yeah.
so that has a little bit to do with the LDS Church, and that would be because Joseph, at a point in time of his life, he knew that if bear with me, if children died at a very young age before they were able to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ, that they would immediately go to the highest level of, and we'll get into that too, but the highest level of heaven. And so I think that kind of triggered within him that, hey, if we were linked to the person going to the highest level of heaven, then that would ensure that we would go there too. So that is when you start seeing the becoming sealed. So when he talks about being sealed to his wife in church, and you have to do that in the temple, it's a very sacred thing. And um, but it guaranteed you to also be able to be in that highest level of church, and they believe that you have to, of course, do all of these different things in order to be sacred enough to reach that highest level, and you want as many family members as possible there. So you're encouraged to do your family lineage to make sure that everybody is baptized in the church with you, so you can see them and continue to live with them after you have passed away. So I think in 2 ways by him doing that, he shows that, yes, he's a devout Mormon and he has followed the teachings and he knows his lineage. And then also that by knowing their lineage, they are, I would say maybe just a little higher up.
Or
And yeah, and able to they're going to be in that top level of heaven. So.
right.
And right, I mean, like when you're sealed like for life. Divorce doesn't mean anything. Like you're sealed to your husband, like for the rest of
think so,
eternity.
but again, not my religion, so I am not for positive. Our religion does not do that. So
Yeah, and considering what all that Chad and Lori did in regards to each of their actual spouses, like, does it even matter at that point, So, yeah, so I guess, yeah, that was my thought too, is this has got to be, if I was a Mormon reading this, I would probably get a lot more out of it. But just as like a generalized reader, I'm like, why are you telling me all about your ancestors and your father? Like, this is supposed to be your story. So, but that's his audience. So I won't be too harsh about that, I guess, even though I fucking hated it. But I did notice that a good chunk of this book, and this is how thick this book is. Okay, it's like a novella at best, length, and a big chunk of it is other people's stories, either his ancestors or somebody else that he's just with or whatever. And I'm like, that's because before he met Lori, his life really wasn't interesting enough to fill out a whole book.
neither were his relatives.
None of his family actually, well, I don't know, did it say that his father's side actually came over on one of the wagon trains of the original settlers, right? Did I make that up?
I don't know that it was the original settlers, but I do know that are you talking about the one that came over from England?
Yes.
Yeah,
I think he came over from England, and then he was on a wagon train out there, but I don't think it was like one of the originals.
See, that's not even that interesting, Because
It's
I
like
know within the Mormon church, like within LDS church, it would be something to brag about if they had been the first settlers that came over with Joseph Smith. Maybe actually knew him or something like that, but he's just a guy who came over later.
Well, he did. This ancestor supposedly did like protect Joseph Smith when he was in England and he was like proselytizing, and I guess like the crowd of people was like throwing tomatoes or something, and his ancestor Finity like caught the tomato and like protected Joseph Smith.
So point here. So it was Milt was his like great grandfather that did this, but it was for Joseph F. Smith.
Oh, not the Joseph Smith.
Okay. Right. And so
that's not even that close.
Joseph Fielding Smith Sr. served as their sixth president. So not even one of the first. He was like the sixth one. He was actually the nephew of Joseph Smith, the Joseph Smith, and the founder, who was the founder of the religion and the last president of the LDS Church to have known him personally. So that was his big claim to fame. He was Joseph Smith's nephew and the last person to have actually talked with, and known Joseph Smith personally.
And that, I think, is going to be kind of a theme through this, which we'll touch on here in just a little bit. But yeah, I mean, so he starts with this, his first near-death experience, then he jumps way back in time to his ancestors, and then it's just kind of a chronological, he tells his life. He talks about his childhood in Springville, Utah. He's good at sports, but he had a knee injury, and that's what sparked his love of reading. And then, high school, he keeps saying that he was really popular and had a lot of friends, but.
Well, and he really focuses on how short he was for a while. Do you remember that part? He kept talking about how he used to be the tallest, and then puberty didn't hit right, and then he was the shortest, and that was like a whole theme for like a good couple chapters, was that he was short. And then now he's not. Like that was very, very much, I thought that was kind of interesting. I felt
Yeah.
showed something about its character.
No, we had talked about in prep for this about how kind of arrogant he is. And that reminds me of that when he said he was playing baseball and his mom gave him a silver dollar for every,
Oh, right. Yeah. Like,
I think a silver dollar for every home run he did. And he said, I did 38 home runs and I sure did need it. I needed to be knocked a notch down for how amazing I was. And I was so good at what I did that and he said, don't worry though, I get my comeuppance coming. And I don't remember if that was because he was short or what happened, but
I think it was. That was his like humbling, was
humbling, yeah.
not being tall, at least as I recall. So, but yeah, and I mean, this whole thing of him saying, like, he repeats it. He says it more than once that he was really popular and had a great social life and lots of friends. And I'm like, did you though? He kind of strikes me as the kind of guy that would just kind of glom on. Like if there's a group of teenagers and they're like, oh, hey, let's all go, do something. And he would just sort of glom on and just be that guy that's just kind of there.
Oh, I just wonder how big his class was. Like, how big is the class of Springville, Utah?
Springville, yeah.
Like, how big is that school? Are there
Probably
like
not.
50 kids there? There's a difference when you're popular in a school of like a class of 800 versus a class of like 100.
Right. But let's also remember that it's a school where everybody is probably, or almost everybody is the kind of the same religion. So you're following the same ways and
Parents
things. And I know you're going to church at least 3 times a week.
Right.
So you're meeting each other there all the time. So you are probably just a group that always hung out. And I found it interesting that did he say they got to high school or something like that? All of his friends started taking a different way to school.
Oh,
and shunned him kind of, and he was all upset about that. Did you?
right.
So popular.
Yeah, I think that was the real tip off of like, I don't think you were as popular as you thought you were. Yeah, and he talks about like, and this is kind of a theme too of like the big, horrible thing that happened was he had some bully in a class, right? Which, we've all had that. That's definitely relatable. But like the whole thing was he just went to the teacher and told the teacher, and so the teacher moved him. The end. Like, okay. Cool story, bro.
Yeah, I found it funny in that whole book too, like you said, how thick it is, and then most of it just being about everybody else's stories. You finally get to he actually starts out with a first near-death experience pretty quick off the bat, but then you don't even get to the next one until like 2 chapters before the end, and I was like, and then there's only 2
right
near-death experiences.
Yeah, that's why this is not a memoir. Like, this is an autobiography of someone who did not have interesting enough of a life to have rated an autobiography.
Very average life, I would say.
Yeah, super mediocre. And that was another thing that kind of I learned a little more about Chad Daybell, I think, which we can talk about. But yeah, another thing about when he was in high school, he talks about how he won an essay contest. And so he got like some kind of silver scholar award or whatever, which reading this book, I'm like, oh, honey, bless your heart. And he even says that like he goes to some kind of competition. He doesn't really, it's not clear what it is or when he went, or it's just like, and then I was in this competition and I was eliminated first round. And I'm like, yeah. Yeah. Bless your heart, but no, you might have been the best writer in your tiny ass little high school, but and it seems like that's as far as he ever went. I mean, honestly, this book seems like it was written by a moderately talented 10th grader, honestly.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, and then he talks about how he was going to apply to go to college. I can't remember which college it was going to be. Maybe Utah State or something. And, he had that feeling where the pen was hot and he threw it down and this is not the path for you. And he said, that was really surprising since I was full on thinking my whole entire life I was going to go on to get my PhD. And I was thinking, not with that writing.
No.
Yeah. Well, and that's also really stupid too, because if you go into writing, the terminal degree in that field is an MFA, a Master's of Fine Arts, not a PhD. So, I mean,
Yeah,
he's not smart.
lots and lots of holes.
And this is where I wanted to ask you if you thought he was maybe name dropping, because he does talk about, and he acts like this is like the highlight, the most incredible thing that's ever happened to him. He goes to the General Conference and he shakes hands with the general authorities, which are such creative names. But I mean, to me, it just came off as being like, yeah, I got to meet these grand high mucky mucks and shake hands with them. I mean, but from your perspective, what do you think of it?
Yes, he was definitely name dropping.
Okay.
And I thought it was funny that when he was talking about his his grandpa Milt being working for the he worked at a high class institution, the Harrison Hotel. But his grandpa would make a point to introduce him to the famous visitors who would stop there. And I'm waiting for like movie stars and oil tycoons or something. And it says Grandpa Milt felt honored to haul the luggage of the prophets and the apostles to their rooms. And I was like, and then there was nothing else. And I was like,
Like,
so
ew.
yeah. So in their way, the name dropping and the names that he dropped, yeah, I mean, Joseph F. Smith was a president, and that was one of the guys whose luggage he carried. So in their religion, they are the high up monkey mucks. I mean, he is the president. They are prophets. So yeah.
So for me, it seems like just name dropping and ass kissing. But so do you think that though, if I was a Mormon who was reading this, this would give him like more credibility by having had all these encounters with various important people?
Yeah, it would show that he was true to his faith and he knew his people.
Okay.
So yeah, and I thought it was interesting. Close to the end of the book, it was talking about how he was number one on the selling list and all of this stuff. But then they said within our district. So I'm sure that district was all of part of Idaho, Utah, and all the where all of his people were. So they're all buying the book. Yeah,
Right.
that's the only one.
And then this I thought was kind of an ominous, like, I don't know, in hindsight, like a lot of these things we look at in hindsight and it's like, what? And the fact that he almost shot his brother in a hunting accident,
Yeah.
like that was kind of, and he doesn't even spend a lot of time on it. Like it's just maybe a couple paragraphs or something. And it was only thanks, because his dad made them pray before they went hunting. And I'm sort of like, that seems like that would be a bigger deal. But I mean, he didn't shoot his brother, but still.
He came very close. Though part of me wonders if he's making that up.
Yeah.
A lot of it, I wonder if he's making up just to sound more interesting.
That's so sad. Like, if you're going to make something up, like, this is the most boring troll crap. Like, this is, like, I agree. I think a lot of it is made up, and that's just even more sad.
Yeah, because well, we haven't really touched on the fact that he talks a lot about how his family saw ghosts of family members and how that was all of their different interactions with the veil and how the veil protected them. Like was it his father or his grandfather that was at work down in like a mine shaft or something?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, he was like going into the shaft and then somebody told him to stop and they told him to go back.
I think if I got a voice from God, it would take one.
Yeah, I'd be like, I'm getting out of here. But he left, and then right after that, the mine shaft collapsed. And then they kept seeing his grandmother just talked about his grandfather always being like with him at church. Like, oh, grandpa, is it John or Joe or something like that, is sitting over there. And then he always kind of talks about that
Keith.
Grandfather being
Grandpa Keith.
Grandpa Keith, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then going to the place where they picnicked all the time, and that's actually where he died in a lumber accident. And they didn't ever tell the family that. And I don't know, I found that very interesting, how that family just seemed to, and maybe that's part of the faith too, is to accept that there are spirits around you, but it was just so openly accepted within the family that I think really the way that his version of his faith kind of evolved, I feel like that falls really well into what he believed and taught through his own books and things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I didn't want to dominate the conversation. I wanted Cori to talk some too. But yeah, his faith completely sets him up for everything he does in the rest of his life, right up to the deaths. And so, and I was going to say, as far as making stuff up, some of those visions and those meetings are straight out of the Book of Mormon, almost right down to the actions they do. Only he replaces the people, and the people become people in his family. But
not even knowing the Book of Mormon, like I could get that he's trying to put himself or paint himself with the same, I don't know, brush, like, oh yeah, I'm just like these other prophets or whatever.
Well, and what a better way to get your people to believe in you. Go ahead, Cori, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, that makes sense though, because whenever he obviously doesn't have a lot of friends, like even no matter what he says, because then he becomes like a Bible nerd. Like he becomes a nerd about Mormonism and is reading the Book of Mormon a lot. And then he tries to go out into the woods and have a vision like Joseph Smith did. And he gets very upset that he can't have one. And that becomes like his whole purpose in life, is to be able to have a vision like Joseph Smith and to have God speak directly to him. And so it would kind of make sense that he tries to attach these like spirit visions from his family to stories from the Book of Mormon. That's really interesting. It is like kind of straight out of that, some of the stories.
And completely opposite of kind of what we believe, because you're supposed to believe steadfastly and, you know, basically without proof. So going out to pray for proof is kind of not what you do.
Yeah.
But anyway, what I was going to say was that part of what they believe is kind of like the prep life, you know, like
because the apocalypse is coming, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, if Jesus is coming back and it comes after all this war and famine and turmoil, but basically it kind of helps with teaches self-reliance. And a couple of the facets of that is, you know, including education, health, employment, family home production and storage, finances, and spiritual strength. So that's getting him set up for the zombie apocalypse. I hate to ruin it for anybody who does want to read the book.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. And then how they believe in the internal marriage. So, you know, him saying that he and I'm going to jump to, was it Lori? That, not Tammy, after Tammy, it was Lori or whatever. Yeah, how they've been together. I don't know if married, but together in previous lives. Planets and being on different planets and multiple heavens and all of that. That is part of their belief too, as far as, you know, we do believe in the celestial, terrestrial, and telestial kingdoms. So that opened up a lot more room for more people to be able to go to heaven. And this is the stuff that I was talking to you about, that, you know, I think that if you went in and truly told Mormon believers this information, that they might take a step back and actually kind of look at their religion a little more. But Joseph Smith did write about, you know, God living on a planet, Kolob, and that was closer to the celestial kingdom. And there was multiple worlds and multiple gods, and if you supposedly, if you lived your life well enough and you did everything right and followed everything to the T, you yourself could become a god. So, and my religion doesn't believe that either. So, even though that was, you know, part of the, and that's the thing, even though Joseph Smith was the patriarch of our religion too, that stuff never comes up. It's
Yeah. There's another YouTuber who goes by the L Mom, L, like the letter L, the L Mom, which I'll put a link to her channel in the description for anyone who's interested. But she kind of goes at the Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow case from the perspective she was raised as LDS. She's not anymore, but like she was raised in it. So she like explains a lot of the belief systems and how Chad and Lori are, going off on some tangent, or in some cases they actually are. This is stuff that, like you said, was in the past of the church, but that the modern church kind of tries to like, yeah, we don't really talk about that anymore.
mhm,
This is what I think attracts extremists, is that they're like, oh, we found this secret doctrine, and
mhm.
so it must be true. And so I think that's, he kind of ran with it, because I don't think he came up with any of this. He does not strike me as a smart or creative enough person to have come up with any of this crap that he claims he's had visions about and all that. So
Especially since all they can do is write about his family's, all his lineage and all of their things that happened in life, and two that happened in his.
yeah. So anyway, he does talk about that he graduated with honors and he gets a scholarship to BYU. And again, I'm saying, like, no shade to BYU, but he is not making their journalism school look good by this writing. Like, the fact that he could be a murderer and all the other stuff, like, aside, like, just as a writer.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are sections where it's like, and I was friends with this person who will be important later on in another chapter, period. And then it's just so bad.
So bad. But so that brings us to the mission trip. And this is where maybe I'm not focusing enough on Chad. Maybe this is just a Mormon thing, but it just really, it flew all over me that he was a 19-year-old white boy who was given 9 weeks of Spanish. And they called him an elder. They gave him the title of elder. As someone who's damn near 50, I'm like, excuse me? Like, literally, that kid could be my child. Like, ugh. And he was sent to convert the heathen Hispanics of Northeast New Jersey. And boy, it was just as cringy as you would expect it to be. Like, that whole mission trip section, he spends a lot of time on that because that was probably the most interesting thing to ever happen to him up until recently, of course. And ugh.
Just from my side, I was really surprised that he said he was, when he said, we doubled down on studying the Book of Mormon because we were going to be elder. But I think it was,
Yeah.
wasn't a deacon, it was something. And I was surprised that they were going to hold a position in the church that early. And then as I was reading about it, because I was trying to see kind of how their church was different from our church. And it said, yeah, they, come in at 13 at this one level, and then every 2 years they move up a level. And in our church, it's a lot different. But yeah.
Well, and that was probably from a time and a place where people probably didn't live much past 35.
Yeah, and not changed since then.
So is elder really kind of a lower position, though?
When you go on mission, they're all elders. So,
Yeah.
even the sisters, and it was a long time before the sisters could even be part of mission. It was always in that church, men do everything, and women can't hold hardly any positions or do anything at all. But yeah, there's all kinds of levels. First presidency, and then it goes down to the quorum of the 12 apostles. We have that in common. And then it's general officers and the presiding bishopric. And then it goes down to your stake presidency. And then they have a ward bishopric, and then down to your individual members. But yeah, all anybody that goes on mission, and that's I think right after you turn 18 or 19, it's right after you get out of high school.
Yeah. He was in college. I think he was 19. So
Well, and
Yeah.
he went early, right? That was the thing. Like, he had asked if he could go on mission earlier than he was supposed to, right?
And I think you can.
But yeah, I mean, that would make sense that he would be like, oh, let me go. Oh, I remember the thing he got early. He got the patriarchal blessing early.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And God had told him to do that or something. He had a vision or something.
That also surprised me because you only get one of those in your life. Our church
A vision
doesn't.
or a patriarchal blessing.
And I have never gotten mine. I held off because I just felt that that was something very, very special and sacred. And I was going to wait for the right time in my life to have it. But when he talks about his, that sounded like going to a fortune teller who tells you just everything they tell everybody else. I mean, like everything that was mentioned in there was so generalized. I was floored because these things you pray and you fast and it is extremely sacred and it is yours personally and it's only to you and so you figure that it's going to be all of this stuff that is directly related to you, and it was just like anybody could have had that one that he talked about.
Do y'all remember what it was? I can't remember. Like what?
Yeah, it was like, you're going to have a great life. You're going to get married. You're going to have children. You're going to do the Lord's work. Everything's going to be fine. I mean, it was just like, even boring.
Yeah. Well, he sure showed them wrong, didn't he? Oh my God. But so, I want to hear what you guys' thoughts were about his mission trip, if you had any particular thoughts, because I had a lot of thoughts.
For me, I thought it sounded terrifying that he was going into these houses at 19. It kind of hit me like, oh yeah, these kids are young that are doing this. And they've never probably been outside of their state, much less their town. And then they're being asked to go into the homes of these strangers and then trying to proselytize them. Like, oh God, because there are a couple times where he gets a little scared, whether or not he's being racist or whatever, you can debate. But like there was the woman who maybe was like a voodoo person and they were trying to get them to come into the house and all this stuff. And then there were people screaming at them.
Yeah, he said people would like throw things at them. He talks a lot about that hostility.
Yes.
I'm like, well, I mean, maybe I just have a completely different mindset, but I would want to know why. Why are they so hostile? What is it about these people? But I guess, I mean, to me, it seems like he was just so self-superior that he just knew that they just needed to find Jesus or whatever.
And I think you have to have that mindset if you're going to go do something like that too, like to just go knock randomly on people's doors and be like, hi, have you read the Book of Mormon? And stuff like that, like people being rude to you over and over and over again,
Yeah, I was a Jehovah's Witness. So I did that when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
Were people hostile to you?
Not really hostile, but just rude, Yeah. And I think that's why they liked taking me, because people are less likely to be overtly hostile when there's a little kid, right? At least most decent people, right?
But, just act like I'm not home. But he did talk in that whole section about seeing spirits and hostile spirits mostly, which I thought was interesting. Because I thought, are they hostile, or you just feel like they're hostile because you think this place is hostile?
I think his like white boy naivete really came through like right after they got there. I'm just going to read. It's just the paragraph. It's real short. But he says, so he just has arrived in his mission in Paterson, New Jersey. And he says, Elder Hansen said we had a teaching appointment to do even before we went to our apartment. He pulled off the freeway to a rundown fourplex with no grass. Oh my God. The family didn't have air conditioning and the heat was claustrophobic. We taught them the fourth discussion and read parts of the illustrated Book of Mormon reader with the two children, and then they served us orange juice and cookies. I guess it was a typical visit, but it quickly threw me right into the real world. My heart was heavy and I was exhausted. I mean, just doesn't that sound awful? They had no air conditioning.
Yeah. In New Jersey, how weird.
I just thought that was so hilarious that he thought, oh, I've been thrown into the real world.
Yeah, as these people are actually being very nice to him. and allowing him to drink milk and cookies.
Speaking of the racist side too, I found it quite interesting when he had the vision of the near-death experience for his youngest son, dressed in the overalls. And did you guys catch who almost hit him? Who almost hit him in the vision?
No.
Oh,
A Polynesian man in a Cadillac.
Oh, right.
And I was like, interesting that you know it was a Polynesian man in your vision.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Very
Yes,
I found that very interesting.
yeah. I mean, obviously, as a missionary, the white savior complex, I mean, that's the whole point, right? But the thing that, like, I just got this feeling that he just seemed very smugly superior to everyone, right? This 19-year-old white boy from a small town in Idaho coming into New Jersey and thinking like he's got it all figured out and everything. But like the worst to me was when he describes the domestic violence situation with the Hispanic women. It was like a Hispanic woman and her mother, and the father, I guess, or stepfather, whatever, was like being violent and assaulting her. And he like he kind of brushes it off and kind of laughs it off. Oh, it's like a Spanish soap opera. And then at no point, like, he's been made aware, he's writing about it, that there's domestic violence going on. These, either one or both of these women are being assaulted by this man. He never once tries to get them help. He never once, like, tries to encourage them to leave or anything like this. And then there's this scene where the abuser shows up at the temple. Like, who knows what he was going to do to those women? And so someone at the temple calls the police, rightfully so. And Chad said, "Oh, I just felt bad for having him arrested." I'm like,
Full disclosure, I skipped that entire missionary part, so I'm thus the shocked faces about all of that. I got to tell you once again, the hierarchy, the patriarchal hierarchy in that church is huge. So that very well could have had something to do with the fact of him just thinking, "Oh, life is
right.
normal."
Yeah, those really patriarchal religions like that, whether it's Mormons or evangelical Christians or, there's lots of them in all different stripes. They do tend to minimize, ignore, or even in some instances encourage domestic violence. Like, they don't think it's a problem really. And so but obviously, like, the person at the temple who called the police obviously knew, like, this is not okay. But to Chad, it was just like, oh, it was just so funny, like a Spanish soap opera. Like, if I didn't already hate the man, like, that story made me hate him even more.
Yeah, he kind of glazed over a lot of that too. I don't know. And I think what Amy said earlier, like his faith definitely led him to be the way that he was. And I don't know, I think there is a bit of a superiority complex, especially for men, within most Christian religions, honestly. So I don't know. That one bothered me. There was one group that they did talk to, or family that they did talk to, right, that actually became rather involved in the church.
He was really proud about that.
Yeah, in Jamaica. In Jamaica?
Yeah, and specifically because they became tithing members of the church.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, this mission trip, like you mentioned before, Cori, this is where he really started talking to more people who claim to see spirits and have visions, and where he started like having more visions. So I think it did sort of, I don't know if it opened him up or it just kind of gave him the encouragement to, kind of go further with that belief.
The family that they ended up become tithing members, they openly talked about seeing their own visions and being in connection with their own family spirits. And I remember it was either him or the father of that family saying they were so surprised. It was him saying it to the father of the family. "I'm so surprised to hear you openly talking about this, because people don't openly talk about these things except in my family." And the guy was like, "No, this is very important," or something like that. And
Mhm.
so, and that was kind of a moment, I think, for him where he was like, oh, other people are like me. I should talk about this more. Or,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
I'm more special.
People openly talk about it all the time. That was my favorite time to go to church, was a Wednesday night prayer meeting. That's when the weirdos came out and openly talked about all that stuff.
I mean, that sounds kind of fun.
It was. And so, I mean, not all the time. It was still kind of a drag when I was a kid, Wednesday night too. But yeah, no, that's, you've always talked about when the Spirit moved you and this kind of thing. Then I have a feeling that when he saw how much attention came from that and how interested people were in that's when he started to see more and more, and that veil got thinner and thinner, and because I'm telling you, by the end of the book, he started reminding me of John Edwards. I was like, this is a total John Edwards situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
By
That's
now.
funny you reminded me of that, but now that you mention it, yeah, very much so. It talks about he goes back to BYU after his mission trip, and someone tells him they have a vision of a short-haired blonde woman who will be his wife. It turns out to be Tammy. And they were dating for 10 weeks when he proposed to her. So that's real mature. And I definitely got, like, just reading what he wrote about her and their relationship, that she was kind of the backbone. Like, she got him the job, the original first job at the cemetery, and she worked full time to support him and the family while he went to school. So I kind of got this feeling like Tammy was probably really more of the support for the family than Chad was.
Can I read a little section here? Because
Yeah.
this will sum up a lot of the church here too. It was it's under my second near-death experience, a vision of all of my children.
Yeah. Yeah.
The visit from Emma was comforting to us, but the thought of another child was somewhat daunting. Despite Tammy's best efforts, Garth was turning into a wild child. He would get into the kitchen cupboards and dump everything out, particularly syrup. He was a master climber. If he saw Tammy put the cookies in the cupboard above the fridge, he would find a way to get them, and on and on and on. I'm like, so right there, it was Tammy's fault. I mean, no, even though Tammy tried to raise them and cook for them and clean for them and make sure they made it to school, maybe even taught them.
Time.
Despite all of her best efforts, I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
nothing saying about me trying to step in and help or anything.
Right. Yeah. No, that's her job. And all the other jobs, right, that she was doing. Yeah. And it's really, I wouldn't even call it creepy. It's just super sad to me. The book is dedicated to her. He does seem to appreciate her efforts in his writing. And he speaks of how much he loves her, things like this. And this book was published in 2017.
Thank you. I was trying to find the publish date on that because
Yeah.
I just at the very end they moved to Idaho, and I was like, okay, well, when was it published?
Yeah, 2017. 2 years later, he murdered Tammy, this woman that he supposedly loved. He dedicated his book to. Like, it just, I don't know, it just blows me away.
When did
It's sad.
When did he and Lori start connecting? Like 2018? The way he talks about like meeting Tammy, saw it in a vision, and then he does continue. He talks a lot about how much he loves her. And then, as you're reading it, knowing that he's going to kill her in a couple of years, it makes me kind of wonder if he already was trying in his mind to think of a way, or he was on the thought process of like, don't really want her around. I don't know. Like, is there some premeditative reasoning why he would talk so lovingly about this wife that he has and all the wonderful things she did? What a wonderful woman she is. He says it calls her wonderful like a million times.
He uses that word wonderful like a million times. It bugged the shit out of me. I went through and underlined every time he said wonderful. Like,
yeah. Well, I did borrow your copy, so maybe that's why it stuck out to me. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it was it just seems so quick. When you read it, you're like, oh, he really loved this woman.
Mhm.
Like, you know, if you didn't know the outcome later. So it just seems kind of quick that within 2 years, he's like, I'll kill her.
Yeah.
I wonder if he met Lori by that time.
And it seems like I was just watching something and it seemed like they did meet in 2017.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's a pretty good, that's a good point on your part, Cori, because because I was thinking Idaho was about the time when he and Lori were meeting, and they kind of had their little secret cabal group going and whatnot. So not a bad pickup on that.
Because
Yeah.
that's the farm that they found her children on, right? In
Yeah.
Idaho.
Yeah, that was creepy. I will call that creepy. The way he talks about finding that property and you know how beautiful it is and it's just meant to be, blah blah blah. And I'm like, that's the property where they found those children's bodies. Like
Yeah.
and the same house where Tammy died was murdered by someone. I mean, I think it was Chad, but I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, like you said before, Amy, only now after he's had all these kids and all of this, it talks about his second near-death experience when he was at La Jolla. And for some reason, I mean, maybe I heard it from somebody who had misunderstood or I misunderstood, but I thought they were saying that he had been surfing at La Jolla Cove. And I was like, I'll eat my damn shoe if that sack of mayonnaise was surfing. Like, no. But he wasn't. He was collecting seashells. And so I can believe that. That is much more plausible. And yeah, he has this other near-death experience. He sees
He said he thought about surfing the wave in. So I think like body surfing or whatever, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny too because he says he sees a tunnel of yellow light and he describes it as being like a heat lamp. But I'm like, oh, you know, what better way to describe a holy and life-altering experience to compare it to the greasiest part of a truck stop?
That particular thing was very interesting too, since because he said that he saw Keith, and what he figured was his grandmother standing next to him, and he says it was more like an urgent business meeting where Grandpa Keith poured information into me during the minute or so I was out of my body. But then he goes down and says, and then when he comes to, he's like, I can remember Keith speaking to me, but the actual conversation about my future tasks were removed from my mind. Why would you have a near-death experience and have him urgently tell you all this stuff only to not be able to remember it?
Right, to immediately forget it. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was pretty sus too. I'm like, okay.
You told me all this important stuff, but don't ask me about it because
Yeah.
I was just looking up when they think that Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell met, and they think that they met at some sort of conference in 2018.
I didn't realize it was 2018, but that meeting is where he told Lori that they had been married in a previous life.
Yeah.
That makes me think that they'd already been talking to each other.
I mean, that could be true. She was definitely standing him. But another possibility is that that's the line that he's used on other people because Julie Rowe said that that was kind of the line that he used on her.
Mm-hmm.
And it does seem to me like he was used to kind of using that line and, you know, being able to manipulate women, but he really met his match when it came to being a manipulator. Like he did not know what he was in for with
Crazy
this.
met crazy.
Yeah, and that's what surprises me because not everybody, but because you know I'm cramming all of the true crime stuff I can about this couple, and so many people are talking about how he's the mastermind behind it all and this and that, and I don't know, man. I kind of feel like Lori was the mastermind behind it all. She, you know, saw these books, met him, and saw what he was doing as far as getting all the attention for having these visions and being, you know, so close to the veil and the people on the other side. And she's like, "Hey, we can make this work. We can make this work to our advantage."
Yeah.
You know, because he was always the one that had the visions and did the talking, and she was always the one that had to go to him to figure out, you know, like somebody would ask her, or her best friend would ask her a question about certain specifics about how this was going to work with the zombies and this and that. And she's like, I don't know the whole thing. Let me go ask Chad. He's the one that knows. So
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I also think that I don't know that she was mentally sound either. I think she's just a little bit off her rocker enough that she could be convinced of these things and believe that they're true. But I think he's also crazy and would also believe if she was like, I had a vision and the vision told me this, and he would probably be like, yeah, wow. I can't believe it.
You know, I don't even know if she's off her rocker. I honestly, in my heart of hearts, thought that she saw the ultimate scam there.
Yeah.
Okay. I could see that.
And I honestly think that she's malingering right now because
Oh, absolutely.
she had been sent for an evaluation before at Charles Vallow's request, and she was able to lie her narrow ass right through that. So if she can do that, if she can be conscious and, you know, aware enough to hide her crazy beliefs and this and that, yeah, no. I mean, I think she probably has narcissistic personality disorder at the very least, at the very least. Like, I'm no psychiatrist or psychologist, so, you know, whatever, but she definitely strikes me as the type of person who needs to have a lot of attention and, you know, glomming on, attaching herself to basically this proto cult leader of Chad, was just another way for her to like become like she saw this group. And if she's in a group, this is just my opinion, but if she's in a group, she has to be like the one above everybody or in charge, or, you know, she's got to be the Regina, right? Of Mean Girls. And, you know, kind of attaching herself to Chad was a really easy way to do that because Chad, like, he clearly knew that she looks wise was out of his league. So it was very easy for her to just flatter his ego and be real sexy with him and basically get him to do whatever she wanted. I mean, again, just my
And if you're gonna get in on a cult, man, you want to get in on the ground level.
yeah, totally. Well, and that kind of, I mean, I just want to wrap it up with the summary. Just like the end of it doesn't really end. Like that's one of the main critiques is that it just kind of wanders around in search of a point. He talks about how he kind of bounces from job to job. And then he does talk about finding the land in Idaho, like he was called to do that. And so they pick up stakes and move to that piece of property in Idaho where the children were eventually found. And then, like, the last chapter, he's like imagining all his and Tammy's dead relatives surrounding them and embracing them.
He believes he can see spirits quite a bit. I'm sure there's not some really great ones in prison where he's at. So
Yeah.
he's probably having a fun time.
Although he's probably not in prison. I think he's still being held at like the county jail, I think.
Oh,
Somebody
I
fact
can
checked
see
that.
all kinds of hostile spirits there. Don't worry.
Oh, yeah.
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 He saw them in apartment complexes. So
Yeah.
And the graveyard.
Yeah.
the graveyard.
But, you know, and I kind of think that's the reason why Ty Lee, because she was the first one killed of the kids, and her body was the one that was the most destroyed. And I kind of think that that might be why, like maybe in his mind, he thought if he dismembered her and burned her, that then her spirit would not haunt him. I mean, I don't know, but that's the only thing I can think of as to why they would do that to her. And then once he figured out how hard that was with JJ, it was just like, okay, yeah, let's just bury him. I don't have the energy to be doing
They
all that.
thought she was a zombie, right?
Mhm. And
So-
JJ too.
Oh, and JJ. Okay.
Yeah, all of them. All the people that were killed were supposedly zombies. That was their justification.
Is there anything in the Book of Mormon about zombies, Amy?
Well, my theory on that is the fact that, one, talking about the people on the other side of the veil, and two, well, many parts. Another part being that after the last days, when Christ returns, of course, those are going to raise and have another 1,000 years to be able to make amends and at least maybe make it in on the lowest heaven. But then also being able to baptize people after they've passed. I think all of that kind of culminates into a zombie theory. And what better time to have this whole zombie theory is now, when everything is about zombies. I mean, Dawn of the Dead was before, that was like a cult flick, and hardly anybody knew anything about it. And now every other movie that comes out is a zombie movie, or every other TV show is something about that. So if you're gonna get your finger on the pulse and produce something that people are gonna buy,
Yeah.
you're gonna pick what's going on. So I think all of that kind of helped him.
Like he started from that and then kind of elaborated on it, would you say?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
In my theory, that's kind of my theory.
I mean, that would follow suit because he's a very unoriginal person. So he's building upon something that he's already witnessing.
Exactly. And he's not a good writer. Like, I was just going through like all the things. The main thing that makes this a really terribly written book is that he just glosses over everything. There's no sense of pacing and structure. It's just like one thing happens and then another thing happens, and like there's no tension or conflict really. There's no sensory details. Like, again, in the hands of a skilled writer, he's going to this place in New Jersey that he wants to get us to believe is, really rough and dangerous, but he doesn't really get that across. He's just like, "Oh yeah, this is a bad part of town." Like, well, tell us. Like, there's never anything. It's like he's gliding above everything and just kind of describing what he sees down below. That's the feeling that I got from it.
Yeah, the most sensory detail you get is from the other pre-told stories about his other family's life.
Right, his dead relatives.
Right. I mean, I got a real good sense about where his father was when he was walking back down the hill of the path and dropped down to his knees and had a very spiritual feeling about, this is where my father passed. And, I was like, there was more detail in that than anything about his life.
Right.
Yeah, because maybe it was real.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's probably a story he always told him.
Right.
That maybe did happen to his dad. Like maybe that did happen. I don't believe a lot of the things that he says happened to him truly. I don't know if they happened and then he over time has exaggerated the facts in his mind.
Probably.
But yeah, I agree with you. I don't feel like his memories are as like vivid as like his family stories.
Yeah. It seems very self-serving. Like, the reason that I don't believe it, because it is so mediocre. Like, he's just absolutely the most mediocre white guy ever, which that's something I wanted to talk with you guys about too. But like, he's good at everything except math. He was bad at math. He didn't like math, but everything else he was really good at. He was popular, had a lot of friends. Like, it just seems very self-serving. And so that's why I'm like, did you though? Did you really? So yeah, I don't believe a lot of it either. So
no, I think he is like that nerdy kid in school that was kind of weird, who didn't have a lot of friends, which is a lot of people, and that's fine. But I do think feels to me he's always been a bit resentful that he wasn't as popular or as whatnot. And as I think one of you said, like he just glommed on to whatever group he was around. And a lot of it to me just makes it sound like he just wants his followers to think he was just something so great, when really, yeah, he's just mediocre at best.
Yeah.
Average.
I feel like one of the things that it seemed to me was that he kind of peaked in middle school, really, when he was like the baseball star.
Mm-hmm.
And he just has this ego where, like, once he stopped being a baseball star in middle school, he had to find some kind of way that he could be exceptional or special. Like, he couldn't just be a person, he had to be special. And that's that ego. I mean, that's how I interpret it.
Yeah, because who brags about being a middle school baseball star?
Right?
I can't even remember. I played sports in middle school. I can't even remember what my scores and stuff were.
Well, and again, his greatest stories were all of those exciting stories passed down through his family that, I'm sure captured his, obviously captured his attention and were worth retelling. It was,
Yeah, I mean, one of the character traits that I kind of got out of it was that he was really dumb. And the reason I say that is that you read through this and he's just this passive character. Like, you never see him really like work through a problem or a decision or anything. It's all just like, oh, then the spirit told me to do this, or I got a prompting not to go there. And like, you never see him actually using his brain. Nothing, he doesn't learn anything. And like with a memoir or an autobiography, like that's usually the core thing. Even among, people who haven't had a lot of hardships, there's usually like, oh, he learned the power of being a good manager or whatever, but there's always like a growth, you went from being like this and then you learned things and had experiences and then you ended up like this. Like, that's not here at all.
No.
Like, he's still the same self-righteous, boring clod that he was at the beginning.
Living a pretty boring life.
Yeah.
Like the whole plot of it is that he was born, he went to school, he went to college, he went on a mission trip, he graduates, he meets his wife, they have kids, he has mediocre at best jobs. The most interesting thing was that he worked for a cemetery. And then he starts writing books after they have a bunch of children, and then they buy a farm in Idaho. That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. You're right. There's no like overarching storyline or no theme. It's just, this is what's happened in my life. And it's not even that exciting.
And even like, in no shade to that, like someone whose life really was that, just a very, average, normal life, you could still have excitement. There's conflict. There's, every human life, to me, every human life is exciting and interesting, even if the person living it doesn't think so. And he he kind of went out of his way to be boring in my mind.
Yeah, he didn't mention any of his misgivings, that he learned a lesson from something, and it's just, and there's nothing wrong with living a life like that, but the arrogance of writing a book that's supposed to make you special is just, I don't know. It doesn't.
Even the title, Living on the Edge of Heaven. Like, it's just so fucking pretentious. I cannot get over it, you guys.
I get the feeling he was trying to connect these near-death experiences as kind of the theme, but it doesn't really fit, like in all
two of them.
Yeah, all two.
Yeah.
Which is really just brain trauma.
Yeah,
And
honestly.
Severe brain trauma that he doesn't tell anyone about. So, untreated brain trauma. But yeah, that's the most interesting thing in the book, really. But he doesn't really make that connection. And I don't know. He's
Well, he never uses his brain at all.
No.
I mean, like I was saying earlier, like being on that missionary trip, that was probably the most exciting thing that had ever happened to him. And you do kind of get that. But because he just kind of glides over everything and doesn't bother to learn or even be curious. Like, maybe you can't learn the answer, but he wasn't even curious about any of it. And so it's like, does he even use his brain? Like, he just seems like, he's just this guy, and the spirit just tells him to go here and do this, and he has no agency whatsoever.
Yeah. I guess it's worked out okay for him up until recently, but
I'm gonna say, like, I don't think it has
or
actually.
is that all a ploy where he wants it to seem like he is just being guided by God and that he doesn't have to use his brain, and that's the whole, I don't know, that he's more of a, what am I trying to say, like a pathway, he's like a prophet basically, rather than someone who has their own thoughts. He has thoughts from God, and
Yeah, he's just led by God. And I know for some people that can be a real, I guess if you're really religious in that way, that can be a real important thing. But for me, I'm just like, he just seems really dumb.
I don't think he's
Yeah,
very
and for my take on my, from my personal take from my religion, agency is huge, and that's why you have all these different things that you try to follow and whatnot. And if you're just waiting for God to tell you exactly what to do and when to do it, and won't move on unless you get this confirmation, about this and that that's the right thing, and then you don't have free will or agency. I'm just like, you have zero agency or free will, and that is completely opposite of, I feel that is
Yeah.
completely opposite of what.
But apparently there is there are people who are really like that. I mean, he got a whole following of people. I don't think it would qualify as a cult, but I call it a proto cult because it was definitely heading in that direction.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
Like, Nate Eaton interviewed a couple other people who were sort of in that group, and they were saying that, Chad was encouraging them to like sell all their stuff and stockpile food and move up there to Idaho. And so, like, if all this hadn't have happened with the murders, or they hadn't have gotten caught for the murders, I do think they would have all eventually ended up together, and it would have turned into a by the book cult. I mean, had all the signs.
Do you
Mhm.
think that that cult activity kind of picked up once he met Lori, though? Like, do you think
I do.
No,
that was
You
all
don't think so?
before that?
I
I
have never.
think she was kind of the mastermind.
I kind of wonder if she's the one that took it to the next level. Like, I think people liked him. Obviously, he was a well-known local Mormon Christian writer, or well, not Christian writer, and people knew about his books, and he'd written 26 books. Somebody's buying these books. And so, but then suddenly he's
Yeah.
like heading towards cult level. And to me, that's interesting that Lori kind of enters his life at that moment. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know enough about the group itself and the timeline of like when they started doing podcasts and blah, 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 blah. But just from my ignorant, not knowing all of that, what it seems like, and, correct me, please, anyone, um, is that he was already kind of setting himself up as this prophet who had these visions. And he had all these people around him who were, reading his books, and, so he was already kind of up on this pedestal as a big fish in a really small pond. And
Mhm.
I think that Lori was manipulative and egotistical enough that she kind of wormed her way right in next to him, and that they just fed on each other. Like, it was like that's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, I think so. Well, because they created the podcast together. So,
Okay.
so I think you're right. I think she just was kind of like, ooh, I don't know. It kind of goes back to what Amy was saying, that she kind of fed off of it and saw an opportunity. Kind of an opportunist, I guess.
Yeah.
Weird
Yeah,
one.
because
Bad
I don't
choice.
know if I can see Chad being smart enough
Yeah.
to be a mastermind, but I could see him believing enough in all the stuff that he was taught from a very young age, and couple that with the fact that all the attention he was getting from being able to see through the veil and have these experiences and whatnot, and then yeah, but I don't see him thinking, I could make this into a cult and make a lot of money off of it, and these are the ways I could do it. No, I don't see that potential in him.
I
I mean,
agree.
he can even use the right prepositions and different things in his book. I can't see him being a mastermind.
Right.
No.
I think he did pretty much believe in what he was saying. I think he was kind of getting high on his own supply, so to speak.
Yeah.
I don't think it was just a lie. I think on some level he did believe it. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that how can I say this nicely? I don't think the man had enough charisma to really take it very far unless Lori was there and knowing exactly, because it seems to me like, again, it's like a Mean Girls phenomenon when you look at all the different people who were involved. It's very much like a high school clique, and who said this and who's doing that and da, 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 da. And Lori, that was her element. Like, she totally knew how to manipulate people and start accusing this other person of lying beforehand, so that when they come and say, hey, did you know Lori's doing blah blah blah, they could be like, oh yeah, they warned me she was a liar. She was very good at that kind of shit. And so she was able to use that skill to like start building it up into this crazy fucking shit that it ended up being. I mean, that's just my interpretation. But
I'd love to listen to their podcast just to like hear the dynamic between the two of them. It'd be very interesting. But I think they're all gone now. Like they've all been taken down.
yeah.
So
Somebody's really got a recording of them somewhere.
surely someone has them on YouTube somewhere.
Yeah,
If you
and
know.
and all that stuff will come back out after the trial, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
But man, January 2023.
It's forever.
I know.
Forever.
So hard. But I have to tell you, like, one of the things that was kind of strange was looking for a used copy, because again, I did not want to put any money in their pockets at all. Some of his books were going for like hundreds of dollars. And like the main range that I was seeing in his books, and this book too, was in the $60 to $70 range for used books. So, I mean, I guess committing murder is really good for book sales.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I got this one for super cheap, but from Goodwill or something. But yeah, I wasn't going to spend $65 on this
No.
crap. Like, I almost feel like he should be paying me for
Mhm.
reading.
Talk about buyer's remorse.
Yeah. I almost feel like, since it's signed, which is not a big deal, like when I was looking through all the used stuff, like, because most of his book sales apparently were at these events that he would go to, and he would sit at the table and sell, he would, sign them. So there's a lot of signed copies. So it's not really worth anything. But otherwise, I was going to say maybe I can auction it off and like donate the money to like a domestic violence shelter or something. But I don't think it's worth anything.
Well, who knows? But I wanted to know, did you get a certain feeling or vibe when you bought the book? A little electric anything, or little
Did you have
little
a vision?
peek through the veil or anything as were you told, did it
I
instruct you?
I didn't feel anything just from the book. Okay. Who knows how many hands it's gone through? But the actual signature,
Uh-huh.
you notice, it looks like he spelled her name wrong. I mean, maybe there's a woman out there who spells it like that, but I mean, my first impression was, wow, he couldn't even spell this very common name. I hope you enjoy the book. Like, I was just immediately like, okay, this guy is not smart. That was but I tried to have an open mind.
You could have
I
picked
did.
like some passage to write in there, like a Bible verse or something to like tie it. He's so stupid.
You're like, I didn't have any feelings except for the feeling to retch after I read it.
Right? It's just so bad. Yeah. So for my lovely viewers, we read it, so you don't have to. It's really bad. It's really, really bad, but it does give us some good insight into Chad Daybell's personality, his mind, all of that kind of stuff.
And the LDS Church do produce some very good, upstanding, wonderful people who do help enormous amounts of people. That's what I have to say from that side.
Yeah, he's definitely not
Not the
indicative.
norm.
Yeah, no. And I think most people know that, but just making sure, yeah. Well, I want to thank all my viewers. And if you have your thoughts, if you've read this book or you had anything else that you wanted to talk about, let me know in the comments. And I'm going to put a link to the LMOM in there too. So if you want to learn more about the LDS beliefs that Chad talks about, you can watch her shows too. They're great. So thank you again, Cori and Amy. And thank you, my viewers. Till next time.